still got her arm up?
No.
Oh, that's what I was trying to catch, but...
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to go even deeper into what else is wrong with that last picture. And we're going to go into three aspects: photographic, medical, and contextual. Today is day 20 in the disappearance of Summer Wells, and there seems to have been a sort of a media silence. There's just nothing coming out anywhere besides on social media. And so one wonders what is going on. It's not a good sign when that sort of thing happens. Tomorrow will obviously be the 3-week mark since Summer Wells went missing on June the 15th. Before we get to today's episode, I want to thank the couple of hundred of you who've subscribed over the last day or so. Thank you for joining this channel. If you haven't subscribed, you can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right of your screen. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So I must admit I was a little bit skeptical when I first started hearing certain things about this last photo. And I've got to admit as well that I didn't know much about the circumstances surrounding it. And that's perhaps why I was quite dismissive of it. Now, as we go through these three separate aspects, it's three different perspectives looking at this last photo, you're going to see there is some reason to believe that this could be crucial evidence at the end of the day. And I've heard people saying, I don't see anything here, because why on earth would Candace drive with her child? If something was wrong with her child, why on earth would she drive to Alison Harris's home? I don't see anything here, move along. I also had that approach, but, you've also got to bear in mind Candace was compromised, and Candace isn't, I think, the sharpest tool in the shed. I think Candace has made mistakes in her life, and perhaps this was also a mistake.
She still got her arm up?
No.
Oh, that's what I was trying to catch, but...
Now, in terms of the first aspect, photographic aspects, I'm a photographer. I've done a lot of work for magazines and so on. The thing that I want to draw your attention to really briefly is the lighting aspect. So first of all, there's light coming on from the right-hand side, sunlight, right? The other thing is Summer is leaning against a white object in terms of the white milk, the milk jugs, right? And so that is going to be relevant in terms of what we're looking at here, right? You can see on the right-hand side of her sweater, it is, although it's pink, it's almost white based on the ambient light that is coming through the window, right? The other side is a lot darker pink, and the same applies to some extent to her face. There's sort of a shadow on the left side of her forehead, and the right side, which is facing the light source, is a lot lighter. And we're going to see why that is important in a second. Someone on Patreon noted that Summer doesn't have her seatbelt on the right way. Very astute. Part of her seatbelt, the portion that is above her waist, the part that's meant to be across her chest, is behind her. In the video footage, a portion of which you can watch, I'll put a link in the description, you can listen to and watch that little fragment of vital video footage. It's clear Summer's right hand is actually moved towards the left, indicative of her falling down slightly, and that's going to be important in the next section. It's at this point that Candace can be heard saying, has she got her arm up? And that she wanted to capture that on video. Now, I know another channel has covered this, the movement of the hand or the arm, but I think the fact that the car is moving tells you that her body's shaking a little bit, and also the mother, Candace, saying, does she have her arm up, suggests that her arm has actually fallen down. Her arm, maybe it was propped up on the one milk jug or something like that. Well, now it is fallen down. And that is probably due to the vibration, the motion of this vehicle. So clearly from the footage itself, Summer sounds as though she's limp. She can't hear anything. She's been asleep or worse for quite a long time. She's limp like a rag doll. And that brings us to number 2, the medical aspects. So the first thing I want to highlight is actually the most obvious. And you got a real sense of that. You got a genuine sense of what we're looking at from the previous video I did about the last photo. From the correct orientation, you can see just how much she's slouching. And so Plunder's video, where she was talking about how the hands have now moved closer to one another, what that's showing is that between one moment and the next, she's actually slouched down further. And what that is giving the impression is that Summer is being propped up by these milk jugs, by all of the stuff that is lying next to her, right? And in other words, she doesn't have the seatbelt on properly, and she seems to be propped up. She's not sitting properly against the seat, even if she was sleeping. And nobody would sleep on, a surface as cold, like a milk jug. No one would do that. So the posture is quite important, showing someone who's, even if she is asleep, she's really in deep sleep, right? Some people who start to sort of move around, their posture falling over when they're in a vehicle, tend to be very, very fast asleep. And I think that's quite important to establish. The other thing that I think throws a little bit of water on this assertion that Summer was okay, she had to have been okay, otherwise why would Candace have gone to Alison? Well, Alison did say quite explicitly that she wanted to hug Summer, she wanted to talk to Summer, and she was sort of prevented from doing that. I think she got as far as they sort of opened the window. And that scene we actually need sketched out in a lot more detail. Did Candace say she was in a hurry? How was she sort of prevented? Were they trying to talk to her? Did Candace leave shortly after that? All those sort of things. How close did she actually get to Summer? Did she call out Summer's name? Should Summer have heard her talking? How long were they standing there? How long did she see her in the vehicle? The other thing which I think is a stupid question we need to ask is, couldn't this footage have been shot from the perspective of leaving Ben Hill Road and going towards Alison? So before the whole incident at the swimming hole, almost called a drinking hole again. And I think it's a valid question because then it would shift a potential crime scene to Ben Hill Road. But I think the answer is, well, Candace's mother was in hospital that night. That needs to be verified. But if she was, then obviously it makes sense that they were coming back from the trip. And so this incident must have happened after the visit to the swimming hole. I've also heard someone say that they don't think it's relevant how long Summer was under the water. I think that is very relevant, and I'm going to deal with that in a second. So in terms of the other aspect that I think one's got to look at in terms of the medical side is pallor. Summer does look pale, and when you look at her there, you've got to actually look at her in comparison to other photos of her and compare her complexion, the tone of her skin, to other photos. Now, bear in mind, when this photo was taken was the middle of June, essentially the middle of summer. So you wouldn't expect Summer to be pale in the middle of summer. You wouldn't expect her to be pale after having swum possibly for more than an hour. We don't know exactly how long, but probably she was out there in the water for quite a while, right? Another aspect that I think is relevant is the water temperature. What is the water temperature? As far as I'm aware, it rained the day before, June 14th. I say that under correction, that the locals may know this. I need to check it, but if that's true, then the water in that sort of river and reservoir would have been a lot colder than usual. and that can have an effect on skin tone, right? So, of course, it's a subjective thing. When we look at the image, it's difficult to tell how much of that pallor is from the light coming in from the right, the white coming in from the left, the sort of secondary reflection off the white milk jugs, and how much is actual pallor from Summer. But I do think, just broadly speaking, she does look a little bit pale. The other thing that I think is interesting is her hands appear to be quite pink, and someone said that the right hand actually looks slightly swollen. And that could be, I hate to say it, it could be a sign of livor mortis or lividity or hypostasis. That is the gravitational pooling of fluids in the body to lower dependent areas. And it starts to result in a sort of darker coloration. It's possible that we're seeing things that we've also got to be careful that we're not subjectively seeing what we're thinking. So if we think something, are we seeing what we're thinking? So we need to be scientific about it. I do think it's important to stress that something like lividity can begin as little as 30 minutes post-mortem. And that brings us to the third aspect, which is the contextual aspect. And here we've got to look at things like, what were the events that directly preceded this image? And the one thing that we know, or think we know, is that Summer was swimming. And so I do think that it is very relevant that she was said to be under the water for a length of time. I think it does matter how long she was underwater, whether it was 20 seconds or a minute. I think that definitely does matter. I'm not going to deal with this in a lot of detail now. I will put a link to it in the description, because I do think it's important that we familiarize ourselves with this aspect. Dry drowning, the medical phenomenon, is described as post-immersion syndrome, but it's rare. It's rare, but it does happen. And of course, one of the classic symptoms of dry drowning is suddenly feeling tired, suddenly wanting to sleep. And so this is a symptom that we presented with in this image after swimming, after knowing that Summer was submerged for a little while. So that is something we know, and so we need to investigate it. What I think is also contextually ironic about all of this is that they just come from a hospital. So Candace had just picked her mother up from a hospital, and they just come from a pharmacy as well. How hard would it have been to have gone back with Summer? And I think you've also got to answer that. Why wouldn't they if something was wrong? So other parts of the contextual aspect to this equation are definitely the personality of the mother, and you can hear some of that in the video clip. You can hear her tone of voice. There's no concern. She actually just seems to be trying to get something on camera. There's no expression of concern for her daughter. And we're going to be dealing with the dynamics between mother and daughter in a follow-up video to this. I've actually been meaning to get to it. So, I think one of the best ways to understand the personality of the mother is to see how she self-identifies. It's also the way that a lot of us want others to understand us. It's how we present ourselves to the outside world. And so how do we do that? Well, on social media. Some of it do it more than others. Some of us do it better than others. And Candace is also trying to do it her way. Apparently, according to Facebook, she recently got connected to the internet. And she's been posting quite frequently. And how she self-identifies is as someone who smokes, and that's mentioned in the Facebook post, someone who wears a hoodie, and someone who likes being outdoors. And so in this incident on June 15th, don't all three of these things happen? She's wearing a hoodie, she's smoking, and she's outdoors, and she's doing what she enjoys doing outdoors. Aren't those two things taking place? The only difference is within this equation, she's a mother and she's got a daughter with her. Her daughter's only 5 years old. The vibe that comes across, including on the TikTok videos, is of someone who's like trying to play the bad girl, just in the same way that bad boys have got this sort of almost attractive vibe about them. She seems to see herself as, the best way to present herself is playing this sort of bad girl with bad music, and the sort of gangster look kind of going on. And maybe she thinks, men will find that attractive, and, that sort of mischievous, playful, flirty thing is going to be something that other men find endearing. And maybe in the course of time, maybe some of these men will come forward and say, I was her boyfriend, this is what she was like. Now, besides the personality of the mother, I think one's got to look at the tone of the video. And the tone of the video is that Candace seems fairly sober. I mean, she's able to drive. She's also not wearing a hoodie, actually. She's wearing, I think, like a tank top. And she's concerned that a particular kind of footage is captured of Summer. And we know that footage was later used in a weird way to sort of exonerate her, to say, well, look, there she was. She was fine. We didn't leave her at the swimming hole. She's not at the swimming hole. She came back with us, and then we planted flowers. But the fact that you can actually hear her saying, is her arm propped up, suggests that something has already gone wrong at this point. And so I think the final part to highlight here is time. And there's a lot of difficulty, and there are issues around time. There are issues around Summer being underwater for a certain amount of time, so that has been 10 to 20 seconds or a minute. There are issues around how long was Candace away from Summer. In other words, Summer wasn't in her custody, and that has ranged from 2 minutes to who knows what it really was. And then also the time that they were swimming or whatever they were doing, was that 20 minutes or was it 2 hours? What was going on during that period? There certainly is an opportunity in this whole scenario for things going wrong and then things needing to be covered up. There's certainly opportunity for that. The other thing that I think is important is if something is happening here, if Summer is in trouble, if something has actually gone beyond that point, then I think it's interesting that this video is probably shot at around about 3:15 in the afternoon. Do you guys agree with that? But basically, let's say mid-afternoon. Let's say not later than 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, then 911 was called 2 hours later. Another thing you can see in the screen grab from the video, and again, the link to that video is in the description. So it's not a image that's been photoshopped. That was something I was a little bit worried about. But in the video, you can clearly see that the fingers of the right hand are slightly splayed and almost touching the hem of her shirt. So if you're not sure, if you can't see any of the differences, in the original image, almost the entire surface area of Summer's leg separates her two hands. In the screen grab from the video, her hands are almost touching. So it does seem as if the boxes and cartons have been stacked the way they have to prop Summer up to make it look as if she's still alive and simply sleeping. It's quite conceivable that she wasn't, I think, given everything that we know now, and that this video was shared prematurely. During the drive back to drop Grandma off, what do you think was going through Candace's mind? Just a final point I want to share is I'm not convinced that that is an arm over the back. It seems quite a long way for whoever was taking the video. It was obviously, well, I think it was Candace's mother. But it's quite a long way to go from holding the camera with the one hand to having the sleeve of your arm going over the seat on the other side. right? It just seems like she'd have to be Plastic Man or Elastic Man to do something like that. I think what is in the back is perhaps the flap of another box, and then there's just a shadow of that flap. I think that's another piece of cardboard, but it's there's not enough nuance and sort of shadow for the curve of an arm. The arm pressing against the back of the seat. There's not enough shadow there and sort of bulging of skin for me to think that that's an arm. It could be an arm, but I think it's more likely a box or something. I don't think it's necessary to say something like, is that an arm, simply because we know someone was there because someone took the image. And the other thing is, I don't think someone can actually sit there because that whole area going against the door is piled with boxes and other stuff. Someone also made the observation that the area to the left of Summer, someone was probably sitting there, and wasn't that someone likely Macbeth? So I think there are a couple of important people who can probably provide clarity on this, and that is definitely Macbeth and definitely Candace's mother, perhaps even more so Candace's mother. So I'm not going to take it further than that. In the next episode, we will go into the dynamics into more detail. I think this is going to shock some of you. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.